Cow farts are killing you. Today we're diving into a topic hotter than a jalapeno in a sauna, the controversial tango between livestock, methane, and our environment. Picture this: cows in a field, nonchalantly chewing grass while the plant-based propaganda machine spins tails faster than a DJ in a disco. They claim that meat is the Darth Vader of environmental villains. But hold your tofu burgers. We're about to serve up a sizzling plate of facts with a side of myth-busting science. You ever heard that cows contributed more to global warming than cars? It sounds like a plot from a crazy science flick, but there's more to this. We're dissecting this meaty issue piece by piece, starting with the basics of greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, the usual suspects. But which one of these guys is the real bad guy? We'll investigate why pointing fingers at Bessie the cow might be like cow tipping late at night after a few Budweisers. Possibly entertaining, but likely leading us away from the real issues. And for those thinking cows are just four-legged methane factories, prepare for a plot twist. It's not about their farts, folks. We're talking about belching bovines and how their natural process has been demonized more than a witch in a Disney movie. We will stir the pot with some spicy facts about rice cultivation. Yes, that innocent bowl of sushi rice might be throwing more shade at our atmosphere than a forest of umbrellas. We'll also unwrap the juicy details about regenerative farming and how it's more than just a trendy buzzword. And for years, anti-meat companies used a report published by the United Nations that stated the meat industry is an eyesore when it comes to pollution, that the industry as a whole emits more greenhouse gases than the transportation industry. Before we dive deep in the chaos, let's talk about the basics. Greenhouse gases, known as GHG, are gases in the Earth's atmosphere that trap heat. This trapping of heat is often referred to as the greenhouse effect, and it plays a crucial role in regulating the Earth's temperature. The primary greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, released through natural processes like us breathing, volcanic eruptions, but human activities such as burning fossil fuels and deforestation significantly contribute to the increased CO2 levels in the atmosphere. Methane. Methane gets released when we produce and transport coal, oil, and natural gas. It's not just limited to those industries, though. Livestock and certain farming practices like those used in rice fields also emit methane into the atmosphere. Nitrous oxide, released through agriculture and industrial activities such as fertilizers, as well as during the combustion of fossil fuels and solid waste. So which one of these are the worst? We use a measurement called greenhouse warming potential, or GWP. It measures how much heat is trapped in an atmosphere. Carbon dioxide has a GWP of 1, methane is between 28 and 36, nitrous oxide is between 265 and 298. But even though carbon dioxide has a lower value, it stays in the atmosphere for thousands of years. Nitrous oxide is at 100 years, methane is at 10 years. Overall, carbon dioxide is considered the worst. Today we're going to spend our time on methane and why the facts and figures used to demonize cattle are wrong. We will explain how methane from cattle is part of the ecosystem. Before we dive into it, what is methane? Methane is just more than a punchline in a fart joke. Methane is the simplest hydrocarbon consisting of one carbon atom and 4 hydrogen atoms. Methane emissions come from the breakdown of organic materials. A great example of this would be from your kitchen compost. And from cattle, it's not farts. It makes a great clickbait article, but not true. It comes from belching. Now let's talk about how cows burping is destroying the world. But before we get into that, I want to go over a chart from Christine Page of Smiling Tree Farm from the United Kingdom. It shows how methane plays a natural role in our ecosystem versus fossil fuels. We will start with a cow in the diagram. And like any living thing, it poops like you and me. And the microorganisms in the soil utilize the carbon that is broken down, enriching the soil in the process. The grass uses those nutrients to become strong and healthy. The grass releases oxygen that you and I breathe. And the healthy grass is eaten by the cow, which in turn makes their meat more nutrient dense. The one country that does this right is New Zealand. And that's why I get my organs from there. As the cows eat the nutrient grass, methane is belched from the cow and goes into the air. After 10 years, it's broken down as carbon, which is absorbed by the grass and other plants, and into oxygen, which you and I use. Now, for you all skeptics out there, still pointing fingers at cattle farms, Let's clear the air, literally. You might have seen those infamous manure lagoons on TV and thought, that's disgusting. It's a cesspool. But guess what? Those stinky spectacles are mostly courtesy of pork, egg, and dairy industries. Yep, it's like mistaking a chicken for a rooster. Easy to do if you're not paying attention. Now picture this. Instead of manure lagoons, we're talking about methane traps, kind of like those fancy mouse traps, but for gas. These nifty contraptions snag that methane and turns it into energy. With a little innovation and a whole lot of cow power, maybe we'll see them popping up on those farms everywhere faster than you can say, holy shit. On the other hand, in a well-managed cattle ranch, where minimal antibiotics or drugs are administered to the animals, scattered manure fosters robust populations of dung beetles. These beetles play a crucial role in methane reduction, as methane typically forms in oxygen-deprived environments. By tunneling through the manure, dung beetles create pathways for oxygen circulation, effectively slowing down methane production. Interest in methane pollution is so new, even NASA admits that measuring methane and finding its sources are still in a learning phase. NASA is looking deeper into the matter, and while doing so, they are constantly adjusting their measurements to get more accurate readings. It does not mean we throw out their findings out of the window. There is value in those current numbers. But if methane and methane are an issue, why wasn't this an issue until recently? If you look at the graph from Methane Levels.org, you see that global methane levels were stable until the 1760s, where they started to creep up and then really took off around 1860s to where they are now. But you may be saying that makes sense since major settlements did not happen until the 1700s and they brought over their cattle. But before the settlements, we had numerous methane producing animals in North America that you probably didn't know about. We had 30 to 60 million bison, over 10 million elk, 30 to 40 million white-tailed deer, 10 to 13 million mule deer, 35 to 100 million caribou. A study showed that in pre-settlement America, methane emissions were about 86% of emissions from farmed and wild nutrients in 2012. Thus, so far, we have two pieces of information. One, methane levels started to shoot up around the 1860s. And two, a 2012 study showing that methane levels from farmed and wild ruminants have been pretty much stable for hundreds of years. So maybe, just maybe, we're blaming the wrong source. And who could give us some insight? Let's take a look at NASA. A 2018 NASA report states fossil fuels in wet tropical environments like marshes and rice paddies were major contributors to methane gases, but revised estimates showed that the amounts were considerably more than previously thought. Everyone's asking for meatless Tuesdays to help the environment, but the meal that's being replaced by rice, which may be even a worse choice. When you're all about getting attention, blaming cow farts as the reason why the world is falling apart has a certain ring to it versus eat less rice. And since the ones who are telling you about cow farts are probably selling you an overpriced plant-based product. So I want you to picture this. There's this big report, right? Like a super serious one with graphics and charts and all that grown-up stuff published by the United Nations in 2006. And it's called the Livestock's Long Shadow, which sounds kind of mysterious, doesn't it? In this report, they dropped this bombshell. It turns out cows are like major players in the whole greenhouse gas game. They're responsible for a whopping 18% of all the stinky stuff that's messing with our planet. More than cars, trucks, and planes, anything that moves combined. Now imagine the media getting a hold of this. They're like kids with a new toy. They're running wild with it. Next thing you know, they're out there telling everybody that eating a hamburger is basically like flying around in a jumbo jet, leaving this huge trail of pollution in its wake. Meatless Mondays became a rally cry, and you and I are now eating processed soy-based foods that try to taste and feel like meat. And looking at Beyond Meat's stock price, it's not going so well. So that's when UC Davis scientist Dr. Frank Mitloehner comes into play. He found that the report calculated the cattle's full life cycle. This analyzed the pollution from the feed, from transporting the feed, raising the cow, processing the meat, to transporting the meat to the store. But that lane life cycle was not used on the transportation sector, Only tail light pollution was calculated. The exploration, the oil transportation, the refining, or the vehicles or the airplanes manufacturing process was not calculated. So it was an apples to apples comparison. If you only take the direct emissions, cows contributed 5% to global greenhouse gases. But Dr. Mintloner did raise a point. We need to measure the full life cycle. It was done for cattle, but not for transportation industry, which the authors of the UN report admit was an oversight. For now, there isn't any comprehensive report measuring the full life of greenhouse gases from the transportation industry. And most of the cattle issues are outside the United States and can be solved with current agriculture technology. Dr. Mintloner points out that developing countries like India is less efficient with their cattle. It takes 15 to 20 cows to produce the same amount of milk in India as one cow in the United States. Dr. Mintloner points out that in 1950, the U.S. used to have 25 million dairy cows. Now we have 9 million and producing 60% more milk. And he emphasized there isn't a need to export the concentrated animal feeding operation, also known as factory farms, but simple procedures and technologies such as basic vaccinations, treatments against parasites, improvements in feeding, and so on will help with production rates. And if you look at the United States greenhouse emissions related to livestock, it's at 4%. And the following quote from Dr. Mintloner insightfully puts it when talking about greenhouse gases from an interview back in 2019 with Altec. The EPA of the United States looks at all sources of greenhouse gases. According to the EPA, all those sources consuming fossil fuels, such as transportation, power production, and the cement industry, and so on, combined are responsible for 80% of all greenhouse gases in this country. All of livestock and feed production in the United States combined are responsible for 3.9%. And in the next quote from Dr. Mintloner gives you an idea how going vegan really doesn't have much of an impact for the environment. Let's assume you were to go vegan for the next year and not eat any animal-based foods. That would save 0.8 tons of greenhouse gases. If you were to fly from the United States to Europe and back per passenger, that equates to 1.6 tons. So to change your diet from omnivore to vegan for 1 year is half the impact as one transatlantic flight. That tells what you should think about the hype that's coming your way as a citizen by those people who try to work through the anti-animal angle. Now here's another nugget for all you planet advocates out there. In a study from 2019, it turns out that methane emissions were a whopping 100 times higher than what the fertilizer industry claimed and even what the EPA estimated. And guess what? These are the same fertilizers used to farm those big monocrops like soy, corn, and grains. So yeah, it's like they've been feeding us a load of fertilizer about their emissions all the time. And you won't be seeing those fake meat advocates like Beyond Meat talk about this because they rely heavily on monocropping, which messes up with the natural balance of nutrients in our soil. Unlike traditional farming with both animals and plants, monocropping throws off the harmony. Plus, there's the pollution angle to consider. The runoff from all those fertilizers and pesticides end up in our waterways and drinking water. Animals, on the other hand, fertilize the soil, which provides nutrients that are further developed by the microorganisms and insects. The soil is developed that enables plants to grow. The plants are eaten by animals and cattle. Methane gases are released into the air for 10 years, then broken down into carbon and oxygen. Carbon is absorbed by the plants, oxygen by humans and animals, and the cycle repeats itself. And this is further enhanced when we're improving our farming methods by adopting regenerative farming practices. Because of greenwashing, the fake meat industry has actually convinced the public that the products are a better choice. It's time for animal advocates to make noise as well as help educate the public and show the world that for the past decade, the plant-based industry's bended the truth. And lastly, there are better ways to raise meat. No doubt about that. And for the meat-based eaters like me, let's acknowledge that information about methane gas is always changing and we need to be open-minded to new information. So if you like this video, please comment, share, and pass on the word. Thank you.